Extra time.
Hello and welcome back to the Extra Time podcast. It's me, your host, Patrick van Straaten, and this week I'm joined by Chris Hamill. Hello, Chris. How are you?
Wonderful, thank you. Fresh off filming Sunday vibes. No, not Sunday vibes, winners and losers. So, got the vocal cords going, and you actually pitched this to me, last night? And I've actually been scratching my head all morning. It's an interesting topic, but I think one that's going to be quite hard to find some clarity over and some answers.
Interesting. Well, today we are going to be talking about managers. There are quite a few good managers currently on the market. They've been without work for a little while, so we're going to talk about two of the hottest names who are constantly linked to every club that might be considering a change and a few that are not. We're going to talk about Max Allegri, Thomas Tuchel, and then we might have a quick whip through some of the other guys who have been sitting on the market without a home. So should we start with Max Allegri? Because
sure,
he's coming up to 2 years out of work.
Yeah.
By the end of the season, if he hasn't got a job, he will have been out of the managerial marketplace for 2 years. And this is a guy who, of course, won 5 titles with Juventus. He won a title with Milan. His win rate at Juventus was over 70%. At Milan, it was over 50%. Why do you think that Max Allegri has struggled to find a job after leaving Juve, given how good his CV is?
First of all, I think that league title with Milan has probably aged better than any of his achievements with Juventus.
Yeah,
I think
agreed.
People, because of their dominance in Italy, right, have just taken it as a given that maybe the financial disparity and the star power of the old lady has played more of a role than the ingenuity of any given manager. Weirdly enough, Antonio Conte, his reputation was far more enhanced. I suppose he definitely turned the ship around more at Juventus than Allegri, didn't he? Allegri kind of was a continuity man. He continued that success built on that foundation that I guess Conte lay when he took over from Ranieri, and Ranieri was pretty scary under him, wasn't it? So after that Serie B campaign. So I guess I think Allegri's reputation hasn't seen that same boost because maybe he didn't or wasn't perceived to have changed anything. The defence was pretty good when he arrived, and it remained so, didn't it? I think in his last 2 jobs, he's only conceded 373 goals in 449 games, which works out to around 0.8 a match. So that gives us a clue as to where his priorities are as a manager. Is definitely a solid base, and he's had some exceptional defenders, hasn't he? Thiago Silva at Milan, of course, Bonucci, Chiellini at Juventus, but he's also extracted, really sound performances out of people that we maybe thought were over the hill in the Premier League. Patrice Evra, Lichtsteiner. He pretty much got moved to Arsenal, didn't he, off the back of how Allegri utilised him. Daniele Rugani looked like he was going to be Italy's next big thing under him, I suppose. Never really materialised, did it? And yeah, I mean, there was periods, wasn't there, in his tenure where they looked like a really good attacking side as well. Shots reached up to 15 per 90 in his first campaign, which is just pretty attack-minded in Serie A, or at least in that period. It's maybe become a little bit more commonplace recently with the emergence of, Sassuolo, Atalanta, Roma, Lazio, sort of the middle of the pack playing attacking football. But I probably think I wouldn't rush to say he's been untreated unfairly by the football community, Pat, but I think he's overlooked. And I often think that actually Italian managers sometimes are victims of not having a identifiable or clearly identifiable system, because they're taught to be pragmatic, right? And I think maybe that can sometimes work against them, that it's sometimes not football, headline grabbing football. Ultimately it's often winning football is prioritized over anything. So I had a look, much like you, at sort of teams that were underperforming in Europe's top 5 leagues. And I genuinely couldn't find a good fit for him. And I started to look at the Premier League because he has been learning English. That's well documented, isn't it? And he has said he would like to move to England. So I started looking at the Premier League, and Wolves stood out. Maybe if Nuno Espirito Santos' his period is coming to an end, if they continue to underperform, maybe Fosun, the Chinese backers at Wolves, can tempt Allegri to the club with a big transfer kitty, with big wages for himself, and whatever promises that Everton made to Ancelotti when they managed to pluck him from unemployment. Which, I think it would represent a fall from grace, but I think these managers are probably willing to take that hit now just to get into this league. And, when Manchester United and Chelsea are employing people like Ole, like Lampard, and not these guys, I suppose that they then have to adopt, a more of a pragmatic approach. Like, okay, we've been overlooked for the jobs that our resume deserves, so I'm going to have to go down the league table a little bit and maybe overperform there. So, yeah, I mean, Wolves, Newcastle, if they got new owners, might be an interesting chat. if they came in with, we saw the Saudi-backed, I forget the name of the firm now. They came in and wanted Poch. It seemed feasible when they promised him people like Phil Coutinho. But that would be a huge departure from where the club are at now, right? So I'm thinking middle of the pack in the Premier League. What about you?
Yeah, I think that's probably the way to go right now. I actually agree with you. Like, I think that there's the thing about these, particularly these older Italian managers, is that they're seen as problem solvers. So if you've got a squad that's a little bit unbalanced, if you've got a team where you're not sure how to get all the best players on the pitch, then an Italian manager might come in and maybe they play a 5-man midfield. Maybe they play 2 up front. And we've seen this from Allegri. Allegri's played a 4-4-2. Allegri's played with a back 3. Like, Allegri's used some pretty ropey defenders, as you pointed out, at times, and got decent production out of them, and generally has always had a pretty stable base. Now, my one concern, I think, about Allegri, well, I have a couple of concerns. Firstly, I think it's that the defence got worse during his time at Juventus. I think they went from conceding about 8 shots a game when he arrived to conceding about 12 by the time he left, which is obviously a substantial increase. My other issue is that I think that this sort of manager is what you might call a floor raiser rather than a ceiling raiser. So if your manager is Max Allegri, there's only so bad you're going to be. But I don't think you're going to be much better than your talent. I think that you're going to be, if you're a team which has elite talent, Max Allegri is going to create an elite team, and he's not going to destroy it. But if you're a team like, say, an Arsenal, or like even an Atletico Madrid, where I kind of thought, maybe you could see a slightly defensive Italian coach going to Atleti after Simeone. I think it's quite hard to see what the benefit would be, because I don't see him instituting a style of play which is going to see those clubs outperform their financial level, outperform their talent level. So I think a lot of teams as a result are now taking bigger swings on guys who they think might just potentially be a superstar, because if they get lucky, that could be the difference between being a Europa League side and a Champions League side. Whereas I think that if Allegri went into a mid-table Premier League side, he would keep them at the upper end of mid-table. They're not going to get relegated. They'd be stable, and then the idea would be that they could continue to build on their talent level. A club like Arsenal, who cannot compete with the top sides but really need some magic special sauce to get them up to there, they kind of need to take a risk on a manager who can maybe work some magic. So I agree. Like, somebody like Allegri is almost I think he's a very good manager, but is also a sort of outdated commodity in the football world. I think he's just quite a practical, sensible guy. And hiring him would be a safe decision as opposed to like a game-changing decision, I think. So, for instance, if you were Leicester, I think that there's much more reason to want Rodgers than Allegri. Because Rodgers, in a lot of ways, is actually quite similar to the Italian school of problem-solving coaches. I think he's quite willing. I think he's fundamentally quite a conservative manager who's willing to switch up his style based on what he has at his disposal. But I think that he is capable of adding a little bit more because he does have a higher pressing game. than Allegri does. So I don't know. Wolves would be interesting. And we are hearing rumours that Nuno Espirito Santo is potentially considering a move, though I'm not really sure where that would be to. What about if he were to stay in Italy, or if he were to go to Spain or something? Are there any obvious contenders there? Because to me, the clear candidate here would be Valencia or something, a historically great club that needs somebody to come in, give them a stable base, and essentially stop this endless yo-yo process of the last few years while they get the squad back in order.
Yeah, I just don't think any manager worth their salt at the minute goes to Valencia because of Peter Lim, right? Like, you can only, even if you overperform at Valencia, like, you will still ostensibly look like you're doing just an okay job. Like, if, for example, if Valencia finished 10th this season with, that really young squad after culling all their stars in the summer, that would be an exceptional job. But how does that look on your CV? When you're Max Allegri, who at the minute, I guess, is still being touted for jobs on reputation. I feel like he has to be guarded about that reputation. Like, if he takes, it's difficult, isn't it? Because if he takes over a club like Fiorentina, for example, who are struggling in Serie A, and then does just an okay job, I feel like he will lose all of that cachet that he's built up quicker than he probably deserves, is where I'm getting at with this. Like, his reputation can only tumble if he makes the wrong move, even though I've just said he probably will have to take a gamble because, as you mentioned, he's coming up to 2 years. So it's a difficult spot for him to be in because, if he doesn't go for a top club and he does a bad job, that might be him done at top clubs, fairly or unfairly. So, yeah. I mean, Cesar Prandelli is, I don't know what's going on at Fiorentina, but they're having a horrible time of it. I think last time I checked Serie A, they were down in 14th, and Prandelli had a win percentage of about 28%. And I don't think he's lasted more than 30 games at his last 4 clubs, mate. So if we're talking outdated commodities, I think Prandelli probably has 10 years on Allegri in that regard. There's all... I think maybe a national team might suit him, but then a national team might suit some other candidates we've got coming up as well. So I don't really want to sort of double down on that. Yeah, I mean, Newcastle or Wolves, like, what a spot to be in. I don't think Allegri thought this is where he would be 18 months down the line from winning what? Was it 5 doubles as well?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think sometimes I wonder if maybe his best hope is that, say, a Mourinho or someone falls out of favour at like Spurs, and then they go for like Brendan Rodgers, and then a club like Leicester opens up for an Allegri. Like that to me almost feels like the best case scenario for him. But failing that, I think Wolves would be pretty good. They've got a good talent level. But I don't know. I mean, I've got a shout for Max Allegri. Which
before you come in with that, do you think it would favour him coming in mid-season, for example, and then stabilising a club rather than starting out anew in the summer and the project being fully his, for example?
What do you mean? Would it favour him?
So do you think, like you've just said, he's good at fixing problems? Do you think he should look to come into a club that is struggling now, midway through a season? Should he jump at an opportunity, a club that are floundering, or wait till the summer when the team is fully his? I thought this might be a good way to tee up your team that you're about to mention.
I think it depends. Like, I think that I would only probably jump into a club mid-season if I basically looked at the stats and thought they were better than they currently seem. The disadvantage of Fiorentina is that it's going to be several years before they get near a title race because there are so many teams in Italy that are better than them. On the other hand, like you say, they're in the bottom half of the table, but expected points, I think, puts them about 8th or 9th in Italy.
Right.
So in that sense, you would probably come in and immediately get a little bit of a rebound with them. Yeah, I think I would be extremely selective, just because, yeah, if it goes badly and you get fired, or if it's just like, one of those clubs where they're not actually good at telling whether a manager is good or not, you know, they just kind of look at the results, then I probably wouldn't go for it. But, you know, if something like, it's not going to happen because they're doing very well this season. I don't know. I would probably want really good attacking talent if I were Max Allegri. I'd want to go to a club that was slightly underrated relative to its talent, I think.
And he has got a history of kind of letting attacking talent do their thing, like playing to their strengths, right? Like I mentioned, he almost got 15 shots per 90 out of that Conte squad that was kind of famously mean in defence. But that jumped up to 16. And 16, 17 is sort of the numbers that Pep and Klopp tend to put up, right? When their teams are firing on all cylinders. So there is history. If you've got good attacking talent, yeah, he will kind of cater to it. So I would agree with that stance as well. But God, maybe he should just take up punditry, mate. I don't know.
Well, I mean, the thing is, I do think that like he deserves more credit maybe for being as dominant in Italy as he was, given that there was that really good Spalletti Roma side, there was the really good Sarri Napoli side, and he beat them to titles consistently. You know, Atalanta were coming through and he beat them to titles as well. Like, I mean, he is a good...
You could say he was lucky in that regard, that, you know, expected points suggested that Napoli should have won a couple of titles, that Gasperini should have won one. Like, they weren't playing the best football in that period. And imagine arriving at the end of a period of dominance after 5 years and your board kind of being a bit like, still not really sure on this guy. Like, he's still not sure he's the guy to like take us forward or to change us. Like, that was a big slap in the face for him, I guess, wasn't it? The kind of antipathy.
Yeah, and 2 Champions League finals as well was pretty impressive stuff. But I mean, that's kind of what I'm thinking about. What I think that Allegri does have, what I think he is outstanding at, is providing a defensive base, as we've said. And I think he's a really good tactical manager in one-off games. Like, I think that is actually a thing that Italian managers are really, really good at. Like, because they are used to mixing and matching, because they are used to, like, altering their lineup based on what they need, I think they're really good in tournaments. And so what I want to do here, Chris, is I want to take you back to December 2007. All right?
Wow. Yes.
Leona Lewis was number 1 with Bleeding
Keep
Love.
bleeding?
Yeah.
Yes, legend.
Gordon Brown was Prime Minister. Madeleine McCann had just gone missing. It was a bad year. An earthquake measuring 4.3 on the Richter scale struck Kent right about the same time that I sat my A-levels, also in Kent, which I assume was not a coincidence. And the other major event that year was that England had just finished 3rd in their qualifying group for Euro 2008. They missed out on a place at the tournament to Croatia and Russia. And at the time, they were managed by a Middlesbrough legend, Steve McLaren. But what did they do? They sacked that Middlesbrough legend and they replaced him with an Italian coach who'd won titles in his homeland with both Milan and Juventus. So what I'm saying is Fabio Capello 2.0, Max Allegri to replace Gareth Southgate as England manager.
Wow. That is left field. I like it. There's certainly some of that Russia World Cup goodwill has worn off a little bit, hasn't it? As Southgate has kind of struggled once again to find a consistent lineup, and his sort of relationship with the fans, with the media, has become a little bit more cagey, particularly around the Jack Grealish situation, right? Which was bizarre at times. Allegri in charge of England. I mean, Capello, great in qualification, as was Roy Hodgson. I think Roy Hodgson went unbeaten in 2 different qualification campaigns. But ultimately, Capello did not fare well at South Africa?
Yeah.
So maybe because of that track record, and this is how, you know, when you said, you know, a lot of people, you can imagine a lot of clubs making decisions based on people's, you know, win percentages on Wikipedia pages. I imagine that's what the FA do.
Yes, 100%.
So that poor 2010, you know, might cost Italian managers taking up the England job in future, but I really wouldn't mind it. Like, imagine turning down, you know, sorry, if they were both going for the job now, Southgate and Allegri, imagine opting for Southgate.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, this is the thing, like, this is kind of what led me to it. I was thinking, okay, what is a side which has really good attacking talent that basically needs to be left to its own devices, but has bigger problems in the defence where it needs to be stabilised? And when you look at the England national team, their centre-backs are so-so. They've got a bit of a hole at defensive midfield, but their attackers are absolutely fantastic. And I mean, like you say, like Allegri just kind of wants to let attackers do their thing. Like it's telling that when Sarri came into Juventus, we were like, this is going to be the guy who's going to unlock Paulo Dybala. But actually, Paulo Dybala had better seasons under Allegri than he's had in the last two campaigns under notionally more attacking coaches. And I don't know, I just kind of think if he were to let Sancho, Sterling, Rashford, Kane, Grealish run his attack and just focused on providing a really solid defensive base for those guys, I think that would actually be a really interesting recipe for going pretty deep in an international tournament. And I do think that that's probably what the difference would be between England maybe getting to the quarterfinals of a tournament or even the semis and maybe winning it. Just that extra little bit of tactical intelligence when they come up against sides that maybe are a little bit more talented than them across the park.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good sales pitch. I struggle to care all too much about who's in charge of England unless we're at that tournament, and then I'll be, rabid. I just keep thinking about Trapattoni being at Ireland now, and sort of what a lovely little stint and relationship that was. I think Allegri. So what we're saying, Newcastle, Wolves. I mean, Newcastle was outlandish as well.
That'd be great, though.
Or England. I think that's a good point to move on, to be honest.
Yeah, well, shall we go on to a slightly more attacking coach then? Should we go on to Thomas Tuchel,
sure.
Who's obviously not been out of work for that long at all, lost his job just around Christmas time, so Maurizio Pochettino could return to his old club PSG. But Thomas Tuchel had an excellent spell in charge of PSG, won 2 titles in his 2 years, took the club to their first Champions League final and a domestic quadruple last season. His win rate in France was absolutely staggering, 74.8%. Only Unai Emery had a better one, and Unai Emery did miss out on a title to Monaco. So really pretty special. And at Dortmund as well, Tuchel, 63% win rate. That's way above what Klopp managed there, 56%. So Tuchel seems like a guy who will have far more options to me. Does that make sense to you? He's clearly a more attacking coach. He feels, in lots of ways, he feels like an interesting mix of Spanish and German coaching to me.
Yeah, and thinking about it now, people will probably think he's more flexible than Allegri, which isn't necessarily the truth, right? But again, I think it kind of boils down to at least our perception of him, like he's younger, like his football's a little bit more fashionable.
Yeah,
I guess. Like, his teams press with great intensity, don't they? They're every time I've sort of gone, looking for info about Tuchel, his teams have led for passes per defensive action. Like they've got, a little bit of pep about them as well, in the sense that they're always looking for overloads, in key areas of the pitch. His ethos seems to be, it's progressive, isn't it? It's pleasing on the eye. So I do think like he's an easier sell to fans, most certainly. And he has a good track record actually of improving players, which I think is overlooked and something that I prioritize, in how I assess managers. Like, are they improving young players? Did Kimpembe have a great season? Did he come to the fore under Thomas Tuchel? Absolutely. Did he convert Rafa Guerreiro to a really competent central midfielder from a fullback at Borussia Dortmund? Yes. So, and there's a lot of evidence, isn't there, to back that up. I won't sort of go through them player by player, but I feel like Chelsea is the most viable destination for him, but he probably won't get it. So I was thinking, would it be wise for him to do a stint in the national team? Because Joachim Löw has been there for 16 years. They just got tanned by Spain in late November, didn't they? 6-0. People saying they're sort of bereft of ideas. Hansi Flick is, of course, I don't know when he moved on from Die Mannschaft, but he's left that kind of national team setup and flourished at Bayern Munich in a head coach role. So it is a good, it remains a good launch pad, I guess, for people who are in between jobs. And yeah, there's a lot of good young German talent coming through. No less than at Chelsea, where Timo Werner and Kai Havertz have obviously struggled in the opening half of the season, and you can imagine him, getting the best out of them, from an attacking sense. But also, like, if you were the DFB, you'd want to entrust this generation of young German talent with someone like him in a national setup. Bild are saying the Premier League, though, Pat. Bild have repeatedly said the Premier League, haven't they?
Yeah, well, Thomas Tuchel, he obviously speaks English. I mean, my issue with him at a national team level would be that I do think he does have that slight pep quality. I think he wants to control what goes on the pitch to an almost ridiculous extent, and his systems can be extremely intricate and rely on a lot of rotations, positional play. That to me is not a great recipe for a national team coach, because you get so little hands-on time. I think that often at the national team level, you want someone who's got, I don't know, it sounds like an insult, but a relatively simple system that mostly features guys in their key roles. And as we know with Tuchel, I also, really respect the work he did with playing Guerrero out of position, using Marquinhos in defensive midfield, like using Diallo as a left back. Like, these are things he tried. I think those things are way riskier at the national level, where you don't have time to work with those guys one-on-one for months. They basically come in and you get, a month together, and then you're straight into a tournament, which pretty much determines your fate as a coach. So I don't know. I mean, to me, this is, if Arteta or Lampard were to be kicked out of Arsenal or Chelsea, Tuchel is the really obvious candidate. I think, at Arsenal, you could 100% say this is a guy who turned Ousmane Dembele into a superstar. This is a guy who turned Pulisic into a superstar. What would he do with Martinelli and Saka? What would he do with Callum Hudson-Odoi and Havertz? And it's hard to imagine him not getting some pretty elite performance out of guys like that. And of course, if you do have a weakness in the squad, as Chelsea sometimes do, in centre-back, or Arsenal maybe have had alongside Thomas Partey in central midfield, you kind of think, okay, Thomas Tuchel might actually be the guy to magic up something to fit that hole. So he overperformed at Mainz. I think he did a great job rejuvenating Borussia Dortmund. I think he did a very good job at PSG, but you can do an amazing job at PSG and it still be a little uninspiring.
Yeah, but I think the difference there is that you reach the Champions League final, right? I agree. It's actually hard to enhance your reputation at PSG, but it's almost a worthwhile pursuit, particularly before coming to the Premier League. If not, just so, just to pick up a few trophies, so you don't have to have that bullshit narrative follow you around about, winning something to graduate to a top side. I was impressed at PSG. I think he made them a little bit more versatile. I did start to see, despite what commentators said during the Champions League games, Mbappe buy into his system. Maybe not so much Neymar, but that whole, can he coach a team full of superstars? Does he quite have that standing in world football yet? I thought that was a little bit boring and a little bit overplayed. So yeah, I think that if like you said, if you walked into one of those sides, I don't think fans would bat an eyelid, and that's probably not what I can say for the rest of these people on our shortlist.
What would you think about him potentially going to a club like Juventus? Obviously Juventus have taken a big swing at Pirlo, and you'd assume that they'd have to do quite badly for him to lose his job. But I don't necessarily know what quite badly is. If they were to finish third, do they maybe get rid of Pirlo? It doesn't seem like an obvious fit, from the point of view of this old Italian club who are known for defence. But actually, when I look at the talent at Juventus, I can see a Tuchel side in it.
Yes, particularly they've invested in exciting, wide, attacking talent. Have they inverted forwards like Kulishevsky or Chiesa? There is definitely the hallmarks of a Tuchel side there. There's plenty of pace in the side. Tuchel at Juventus. It's similar. It's similar to my question that remains, with PSG. Like, what is their project? What is their long-term vision? When he was sacked, they said like it's because the football we're producing or the results we're producing don't align with the sporting project anymore. And I was just sat there scratching my head thinking, okay, like what is it? And it's a similar. I have similar questions for Juventus, right? When they let go of Allegri, brought in Sarri. There was an element of like I guess appeasing the fans there because they'd become a little bit frustrated with the football. So I guess in that sense, at least Tuchel is still a departure from what they had before and where they wanted to move towards. But I don't see no, he probably would take it. I was going to say I don't see a massive upside to coming in at Juve now, but yeah, it is. I think it's an interesting proposition you put forward, mate. I think he would have to take it if he was offered it. What about you?
I think he'd take it if he was offered it. I mean, I don't really know what they'll do with Pirlo, but the thing is, my issue with Arteta, with Lampard, with Pirlo is that I think often we're talking. I go back and forth on this because sometimes I think this guy hasn't done enough to merit losing their job, but I also kind of think that's not really how you want to run your like multi-billion-dollar company. It's not like has this person like done badly enough that we can sack them? It's more like, can we do better than this? And I think that Tuchel is a known quantity and is probably much better than Lampard, Arteta and Pirlo. Like maybe one of those guys will end up being better than him, but I'm not sure any of them are better than him now. And so I would probably take him at any of those three clubs. I think that he'd kind of make good sense for them. And especially because, Chelsea aren't getting the best out of their attacking talent right now. And it's hard to see how they fit it all in. Arsenal probably need a little bit of managerial genius to make up for their attacking deficiencies. And Juventus are in this weird transition between, the great old squad of the past and an exciting new squad of the future, and Tuchel can maybe smooth that by doing some slightly unconventional stuff.
But okay, with Juventus, now I've had a moment to think about it. Like, seemingly they would have known, that good managers would have come available in this season, as is the nature of football, and they must have, visited that scenario where there'd be a temptation, when it came to sacking Pirlo, their rookie manager. I'm imagining they were fairly realistic with their view from the off. Like, there was a chance, they must have considered there was a chance that they wouldn't get off to the greatest of starts, right? So they must see something in him, as in like, how long do they give him before they think, okay, like our end point, like this was our end point, or we need to bring our end point forward, or our expectation of where we wanted to be? Do you get where I'm going with this? Like, they must have known that they were going to go through a rocky patch, that other managers were going to become available, but it feels like they've made a commitment to him.
Yeah.
And then like betraying that commitment is the sign of poor planning as well. It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah, I mean, I think they objectively planned it badly. Like the fact that he was brought in as youth team coach and then like a week later was first team coach.
The legacy's not really there, is it? That whole legacy planning. I agreed.
Yeah, they don't seem to have any idea what they're doing. But I can understand that now they've said, you know what, you can finish 4th this season and that's okay. But I also, given how quickly they soured on Sarri, I kind of feel like, okay, well, Pirlo gets more leeway because he's a club legend, but how much leeway do you really get at Juventus?
Yeah,
I think it's hard to tell.
That. You've nailed it there. So it's like, okay, if he finishes 4th, and that's their barometer for like an okay season, like for that triggers another year of Pirlo, let's say. How quickly does he then have to improve in his second year to retain the job?
Yeah.
And then, like, how quickly does that just bring the long-term plan? Does that turn the long-term plan to dust? Do you know what I mean? So it's like he's going to have to take a freaking quantum leap second year. Maybe he's probably in a similar situation to Lampard now, isn't he? Really, maybe the Juve hierarchy will have one eye on how that situation's panning out. And imagine if like Tuchel or Allegri ended up at Chelsea, they'd be like, well, history will probably repeat itself here.
Yeah. Well, shall we? I feel like we've done the best we can do with those two managers because the managerial market is genuinely really difficult right now. So before we finish up, should we do a few quick hits? I'm going to throw some names of unemployed managers at you, and you're going to tell me where you think they could go. Okay? So let's start with Maurizio Sarri because I think he's one of the hardest ones.
Jesus. So I actually wrote Fiorentina down next to him. Yeah, I think I'm gonna probably stick with a side like that. Like I can see him being forced to go to a middling club now, and probably him opting to stick in Serie A, right?
Yeah, I think so as well. Like, I mean, I think there was a window where if he'd gone, I think probably if he got exactly the right top side, I think he could genuinely be like a world-class manager at the right side, like he was at Napoli. But I kind of wanted that a few years ago. I kind of wanted him to go to Barcelona a few years ago. I think that would have been really interesting. He's obviously not going to get a club of that magnitude now, and I think that he will probably end up as like an upper mid-table manager unless he gets incredibly lucky with a team. But who knows?
Yeah, but he's been a victim of perception as well, hasn't he? Like, how do you go to Chelsea, win a Europa League, and have a win percentage that is 10 to 15% better than Lampard's is right now? Go to an aging Juve. Admittedly, some of the transfer business was a little bit muddled. You know, trusting Higuain is number 9. It felt kind of like safe, like he was incapable of innovation. But then, how does winning a Scudetto and a Europa League actually diminish your reputation somewhat? It's a little bit unfair, but it's maybe, like you said, just his timing wasn't great.
Yeah. Lucien Favre, where should he go?
Oh, man. Maybe back to Nice.
Celtic.
You think Celtic?
Well, I don't really think it, but I'd like to see it. I feel like Celtic to me should absolutely be shopping in this market. Like, who are these guys who've been ditched by like big clubs and other teams might maybe turn their noses up at without justification? That should be what Celtic's doing. That's what they did with Rodgers, and it was brilliant.
I know people. It is really strange how people forget, like the Brendan Rodgers, reparation project, happened at Celtic, as if they rated him after Liverpool and before Celtic. Like, his reputation was massively tarnished, wasn't it? By what was, I think Liverpool were in 7th when he was sacked eventually. So people's memory, is short in football. I would probably prefer Leonardo Jardim to Lucien Favre.
That'd be fun.
At Celtic. Like, I think Jardim just hasn't really done a bad job anywhere he's gone. Like, admittedly, his last season at Monaco wasn't great, right? But I think if you take a holistic approach, the club just wasn't in a good position, full stop. And stability at that point probably represented like success, post Thierry Henry, etc. Yeah, I think he did a great job in Greece, Portugal, France. So he's definitely got that the ability to adapt, and I can see him bringing on the youth at Celtic in a way that Neil Lennon certainly isn't. Brendan Rodgers did to an extent, although he kind of used his profile to bring exciting talent to the club and then develop them rather than sort of homegrown talent. Like the last players at Celtic, well, Kieran Tierney was the last outstanding graduate, and then before that, Callum McGregor and James Forrest's class, and they're both kind of like between 27 and 29 now. So it's been a while since there was a real emphasis on our youth. And I would get quite excited, if a Julian Stefan arrived from Rennes, if a Jardim arrived, most certainly. But as for Favre, I don't know. I just think his Dortmund was as big as his quirks probably allowed him to be. Have I cut out again?
No. I was just giving you a moment to think. You looked like you were pondering.
Oh no, I just genuinely don't know with Favre.
Yeah, I'm never quite sure how good I think he is. Like, he's one of those guys, actually like Jardim, where like they've consistently beaten XG. I think Jardim has a bit more attacking upside, I think. Like, I mean, I think I just preferred Jardim teams that I've watched over the years. So, yeah, I mean, Jardim, actually, now I think about it, if Nuno Espirito Santo did leave Wolves, Jardim is probably who they'd go for. Just a guy who can come in and talk to all their Portuguese players, will do something relatively practical and just get everyone moving in the right direction quite quickly. But I don't really know where Nuno would go right now. Like, there have been all these rumours about him wanting to leave, about his agent shopping him around, but I just can't see who's in the market for a Nuno Espirito Santo at the moment. So shall we finish up with Luciano Spalletti? Because I've always been quite a fan of Luciano Spalletti, like really attacking coach, like especially at Roma. His Inter spell was not great, but it wasn't terrible. Got them back in the Champions League. And I mean, that Roma side really was something special. So I think Spalletti is quite an interesting one. Like, Spalletti is more attacking than most of that generation of Italian coaches. Like, high pressing, good fun. I don't know. I think that there could potentially be an interesting home for him.
Yeah, and he's gone as far as a field as Russia, hasn't he?
Yes, he has.
In order to stay a top flight manager, and I think he delivered domestic success with them. So a little bit like Jardim, a little bit like Favre. These guys are 60 plus. They've got excellent records. But I think like image and perception will play a part in them, getting a bigger job. Now, I don't think any club, this might be being me generalizing or being dismissive, but I don't think many clubs want to be seen to be appointing like 60-year-olds. I think they want to come across more ambitious, more forward thinking. And that's where I think there is a gap for clubs like Celtic to kind of utilize someone's experience, someone's standards to kind of drive the standards up internally, because they're being overlooked for whatever reason. Like, how can these guys be available on the market and club legends, novice club legends, be being appointed freely if the system of hiring a manager isn't flawed? Like, first of all, I think only an exceptional manager makes a difference, right? Like, more often than not in modern football, it does come down to wages and squad building. But I think some of these guys are difference makers that we've got on our shortlist. And yeah, if the right club comes along, best of luck to them. And I do think Celtic are an interesting profile of club, actually, where you can offer them Champions League football. You can offer them if they do a good job there, one last run at a top 5 league. So that might be like an interesting halfway house for a lot of these guys as well, because Neil Lennon, I think his time most certainly has come to an end in my eyes. 6 victories in 20. I think you and I could go up there and get more than that from this current Celtic squad.
Oh, I'd love that. Like when Liverpool had joint managers, you and me at Celtic. I'd do an absolute job at Celtic. Come on, guys, go out there. Look at who are these people? They're all pubbers. Like I've got to offer a little defense of Leonardo Jardim, though. You're talking about these managers being 60 plus. Leonardo Jardim, I believe, is 46 years old.
Yeah. So I was talking more like
Spalletti,
Favre. Yeah. Like Jardim is surprisingly young.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah. Like he looks as old as the others, but he's not. So yeah, I do think like Jardim is. As we worked our way down the list, they kind of got older, right? Sarri, Favre, Spalletti. Like Spalletti looks good for his age, man. Like he loves the sun. He's the proper sun seeker, isn't he? He's like orange most of the time. But yeah, I think Jardim is probably the one that people are sleeping on. I don't know what you think out of the ones we've mentioned.
I think so, probably. I mean, Favre's probably like less of a gamble in some ways, but if I were appointing a coach, I'd be much more inclined to take a gamble on a Spalletti or a Jardim. I think there's a higher ceiling there. Certainly if I were a club like Celtic, but even if I were, I don't know, if I was a mid-level Premier League side, like I think I'd think, yeah, you know what, like I think Leo Jardim is like a good coach. I think worst case scenario will be fine. Best case scenario will be really good. Same goes for Spalletti. Favre, I think I don't know. I think maybe this is going to be super boring. And as for Sarri, I just don't really know what to make of Sarri anymore. Like he's almost got like a Pep vibe where he needs extremely specific talent, and if he doesn't have it, it's just not going to work. So I'd be more inclined to go for the others because I think they'll be able to do more with less, I guess. Well,
yeah, I like it.
I think that just about brings us to the end this week, Chris. Is there anything that you would like people to go and check out after this?
What day does this come out? Wednesday. Now just go and check out the latest top 10s on Football Daily, Euro Football Daily, and we're also putting together a string of January-related scout reports and explains. So go and check them out as well.
Yeah, we've got loads of good transfer-related content, even though the window is a little bit of an unpredictable one so far. Make sure that you check out other episodes of the podcast as well. Subscribe to the podcast channel on YouTube if you're not Football Daily Podcast, or subscribe to it using whichever podcast app you favour. Thanks very much for joining me today, Chris, and thanks to you guys for watching/listening. We'll see you next time. Bye.